And now, great moments in X-ray vision. What if your eyes could see through walls? Well, first, you'd probably freak out. And then you'd be able to see everything that's happening around you, even inside your backpack. You'd see all the cool stuff your classmates are hiding in theirs. So you'd either have to get them to show you or use your super sight to peek into their backpacks when they were even looking sneaky. That would be kind of useful for school. But when you got home, it would be weird. You'd be hanging out in the living room watching TV with your family. But with your X-ray vision, you'd be able to see right through the walls into your parents' bedroom. If they were trying to, spice things up, you wouldn't be able to look away. And it'd be awkward. When your friends came over, you'd have to find places to hide so they could unaccidentally use your X-ray vision on you. Like maybe under a blanket fort. Or, if you really wanted to take things to the next level, you could build an underground lair with secret passages and hidden compartments. It would be like a real-life version of Harry Potter. Except instead of magic, it would be science fiction. If we could see through things like walls, that would be so convenient. No more unlocking doors. But how does that even work? Well, to understand what it'd be like to have X-ray vision, let's learn a bit about how X-rays work. You may have had an X-ray machine at your dentist's office. They're also used at airport security to scan your luggage. At first, the idea of being able to see through people and objects seems like it would be totally awesome. Kind of like Superman, but there's a lot more to being a superhero than just cool powers. Even Superman had to deal with the downsides of his super senses. For example, he could hear pretty much anything, anywhere, anytime. Imagine sitting down to watch a movie in a theater and hearing not only the dialogue from the screen, but every whisper and cough in the whole audience. He could even hear people's thoughts, like, great, maybe they're thinking about how awesome you are. But more likely, they're thinking about pizza toppings. Not exactly pleasant, and even if you have good intentions, your superpowers don't always end up benefiting the world. Sometimes they make things worse. So if we had X-ray vision, sure, we'd be able to see through walls and all that, but is that really something we want? To find out, let's start with the basics. What actually are X-rays? They're a form of electromagnetic radiation like radio waves, microwaves, infrared light, and gamma rays. But unlike some of those other forms of radiation, X-rays are invisible to the human eye. They're also higher energy than UV rays, which means they can pass through most solid objects without being absorbed. That's why we can use X-rays to see through suitcases and people's clothes. If you've ever gotten a security pat-down, you know what I mean? The amount of energy in a wave is related to its frequency and wavelength. Visible light has relatively high frequency and low wavelength. If you mix different frequencies together, you get new colors of light. Red light has the lowest frequency and violet has the highest. X-rays have way higher frequency and much lower wavelength than visible light. In fact, they're less than half the wavelength of UV light. X-rays were discovered by German physicist Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen in 1895 after he noticed that a nearby cathode ray tube was making a fluorescent screen glow. Even though the tube was covered, Röntgen was curious, so he turned off the light in the room and looked closer. He saw that the rays were coming from the tube and passing right through the screen's cardboard covering. At first, scientists thought these mysterious rays might be some form of light that we just couldn't see. After all, we couldn't see radio waves or UV rays either. But eventually they realized Röntgen had discovered a completely new form of electromagnetic radiation. He named it X-rays because he didn't know what it was, and X is the unknown. X-rays are all around us. We can find them naturally occurring in space and on Earth from radioactive materials. But we can also produce them ourselves with special machines. If we really wanted to, we could engineer our eyes to see X-rays and thus see through all sorts of solid objects. But before you start worrying that Big Brother is gone, hook you up to a machine that lets them spy on you, you should know that this isn't really how spying works. Even if you could see X-rays, all you'd see is a shadowy silhouette of whatever object is blocking them. There'd be no actual detail. So it'd be like trying to figure out what's in someone's suitcase by peeking through a wall and seeing the shape of it. You'd just be able to tell that there's something in there. Not exactly James Bond level stuff. But back to those superhero eyeballs. How would they work? Some animals see outside of the visible light spectrum. For example, mantis shrimp can see ultraviolet light. Their eyes have special cells called photoreceptors that react to different wavelengths of light. And mantis shrimp have extra photoreceptors that let them see UV light. Humans, on the other hand, don't have any photoreceptors that react to X-rays, and it's unlikely that we ever will. That's because evolution doesn't necessarily equip organisms with the ability to see parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are very useful to them. Sure, it's cool that mantis shrimp can see UV, but it's probably more important for them to be able to hunt prey that's brightly colored in the UV range than to see X. As far as we know, no animal on Earth can see X, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. We just need a little technology help. In the future, humans might be able to see X-rays. If we engineered our own eyes to include photoreceptors that react to them. Photoreceptors contain molecules called These pigments change shape when exposed to light, and that shape change triggers a chemical reaction that sends a signal to the brain. Scientists think that if they inserted a gene into our DNA that codes for a photopigment that reacts to X-rays, we could see them. However, this is kind of a long shot. Using X-rays to see inside of our bodies isn't very safe. Cancer-causing radiation like this can damage the DNA in our cells, and the eyes are especially sensitive to radiation damage. So it is unlikely that this kind of superpower will evolve naturally, or that scientists will ever develop it for us. Maybe we'll be stuck relying on good old-fashioned cameras for now. Even if we could see X-rays, there's another problem. The photosensitive cells in our retina would have to be huge to detect the faint signals that would result from the X-rays passing through our bodies. They need to be about 100 times larger than the cells in our retinas today. Plus, we'd have to remove all the other kinds of photoreceptors in our eyes. So the X-ray ones had enough space to work. Otherwise, we'd see a jumbled mess of X-ray images mixed with regular ones. The downside, it would be really hard to see anything clearly. It would almost be like trying to watch TV with a trillion static killing those pesky electrons on your arm during a winter. Yeah, that would be rough. There are some situations where it would be nice to see X-rays, like inside a building that's caved in or after an earthquake. But seeing X-rays all the time would be tough. It'd be like if you could hear every conversation happening in every room at once. In order to see through walls, we'd need some serious tech. Cameras that can see X-rays already exist, but they're big and expensive and used mainly for medical imaging. Also, if everyone had X-ray vision, hospitals would be out of business. Oh wait, never mind. We'd still need them to perform surgeries. But what about privacy? With X-ray vision, people could spy on each other all the time. We'd need to cover up every window and wear lead-lined clothing to keep our insides to ourselves. Plus, we'd need to make sure that our walls were lined with something that blocks X-rays, like concrete. Our houses would look like prisons. So, yeah, even if it were possible, we probably don't want to be able to see through walls. We can only hope that one day we'll have superpowers like actual We're working on it, guys. Just stay tuned. And thanks for watching.